Christopher Balzano.
With Tripping on Legends.
Tripping on Legends, episode 7.
7. Mm-hmm.
7. And it's kind of like...
Lucky 7.
I was going to say it's a little bit ironic, paradoxical.
What was that word?
Because this, 7 being the number of divinity.
Is it?
And the number of, God.
7 is the number of God.
Mm-hmm. 7 is supposed to be the perfect number.
7 is the perfect number?
7 is considered the perfect number in religion. And it comes up in other religions, but especially in Catholicism.
So I should know this then.
You should know this.
Being raised Catholic.
Yes.
Nope. No recognition.
Never heard of the 700 Club back in the day?
No.
No, or anything like that. 7. Right, because the imperfect number, right? So if 7 is the perfect number, the imperfect number is...
13? I don't know, what?
1 less.
Really?
Right.
6?
So 6.
Oh, 6 being...
Oh, so now we're getting it, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the theme of today's episode, right?
Absolutely.
Because you put 3 of those together and you got yourself a nice old 666, the number of the beast.
Bit over, it's 999.
The number of someone else who's not the beast, who may be a beast. We don't want to judge them and take away their bestiality, but 6 is the number of the Antichrist, is the number of the devil.
Which I'd be interested to know how the devil exactly got the number 6 associated with him.
Because it's 1 less than for the
but
perfect
where
number.
did these numbers come from? You know what I'm saying? Who decided that was the perfect number?
There's actually a lot of interesting, numerology kind of connections.
For the devil.
There are a lot of interesting numerology people that are out there.
Okay.
Feel free to look them up anytime you like. Okay. But for now, we're just going to take it at face value that all throughout the Bible, 7 and variations of the number 7 appear. Okay. And that's considered the perfect number.
I'll take your word for it until I break out my Bible.
Okay. You're not going to... Okay, not only is 7 being the perfect number and the number of Jesus and God so ridiculously well known that I don't even know how to deal with you saying you have to fact check me on that. It's okay, there are demons and monsters and ghosts, and then you're like, oh, okay, you just take it at face value, and then all of a sudden I'm like, 7 is a biblical number that often is referred to as the perfect, and you're like, I don't believe you.
It could have to do with that was my anniversary with the ex. It was on the 7th month of the 7th day of the 7th
day of the 7th, well, there you go.
Exactly, so I did not find that the perfect number.
Well, and what year were you married?
2007.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, that there was, we're not going to get too much into the symbolism of that, but 1 less than that would be 6. Which brings us to the devil.
Okay.
The devil, Satan.
The devil.
Yeah. So...
My sweet Satan.
I was just thinking about that. My son is coming off of being sick. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I told this story when George Case was on Spooky South Coast a few months ago. Mm. But I was really into JK Cinema, which was this website. And they did a lot of little dirty movies and things like that. But they had this whole urban legends section.
Okay.
And they did these urban legend movies that are amazing. We should actually put a link because I think the site itself is still up.
Oh, wow.
And I tried to watch them with my nephew a few months ago, and he didn't think that they were. He was like, these are the most boring things. I'm like, what are you talking about? They freak me out. But there was one of them on the backwards lyrics, especially in Stairway to Heaven. Mm-hmm. And... so, we had George Case on, and so it brought it back into my mind, this episode, because Devin was sick, and we were waiting for his fever to break, right? And then I kind of, was getting feverish, too, one night. And so I was hoping that it was going to not get into a full-blown sickness, but it got me thinking about, I was watching all these JK Cinemas years ago, and I got this really, really high fever. And I was just sweating and hallucinating. and I had been watching.
Goodness.
I know I'd been watching the J.K. cinema about the Stairway to Heaven and the, My Sweet Satan and his number is 666 and all that, and the way that they showed it looked just like that that Led Zeppelin like beat being played backwards, and the way that Robert Plant's voice sounded back, and I just kept going through my head over and over and over again as I was having this really, really high fever and hallucinating and things like that. And I thought like the devil was coming for me, and I just couldn't break like that cycle of getting it over in my head over and over and over again. It was like, what do they call it, an earworm or whatever it was, but it was like an evil, possessed, monstrous earworm. That was like...
Did that just recently happen again? Were you thinking that you were possessed?
No, but when I get a fever, I start to think about it again. I start to think about how absolutely horrific that episode was, because I have always been both fascinated and scared of the devil.
So did you go watch it again just to kind of psych yourself out or tell yourself, no, it's not really as terrifying as you remember?
No. What are you, crazy? No. Not because I thought I would be scared of it or anything like that, but like it's kind of like been there, done that.
Oh, gotcha.
Kind of thing. It was just more that it was once again, that synchronicity stuff that we've talked about. We were going to be doing this episode, and then all of a sudden, all of these references to those kinds of things started popping up.
I see.
And we'll get into a little bit later in the episode. But I started to hear like a lot of Allman Brothers this week. And it was just crazy because, I don't listen to the radio much. I'm a big podcast listener. But it seemed every single time I was turning on the radio, I was hearing something that had to do with the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner. And so it was kind of like a weird little thing going on.
We've talked about that before, how you can almost, what's the word that I'm looking for? Call into play the things that are on your mind.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, it's pretty interesting.
So, I thought I would start by asking you, like, what are your thoughts? What's your experience with the devil? Like, how do you perceive him? How kind of, like, were you taught? Like, what's your...
I can't really remember what I was taught so much. Like, in Catholic school as a young child, you were just taught that the devil is evil. You know, when the devil exists, that's what the evil in the world is the devil, is people that are possessed by the devil. That wasn't so much church teachings as it was just probably like family influence.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because, like, all of that, and of course, especially now or in the last 10, 20 years, there's this real push for exorcism and more of a kind of affirmation of the church. But I don't ever remember hearing about exorcisms from the church.
Yeah.
No. Or even the fact that you could become possessed. I mean, it's in the Bible, but I don't ever remember it being like a subject that was talked about.
I don't think it was.
Or even really like you were saying, even like the devil was never really talked about like in CCD or anything like that. But it was always this kind of like, it's almost as if they went, movies and TV are going to cover that.
Right,
we'll cover the stuff, we'll cover the crap that they never get to.
Cover the sin and what you're not supposed to do to avoid the devil, to avoid going to the devil.
Right.
Yes, 5 years of Catholic school, you know what I mean? A strict Catholic school. Don't really remember anything about the devil, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So probably more influenced by TV, movies, books, family, sayings or experiences.
What do you mean, like, by saying family sayings?
Like, okay, my grandmother, God bless her heart, she used to make, like, the sign of the devil, is what she called it.
Oh, yeah.
Which, okay, our viewers can't see, but I'm holding up, like, 2 fingers that are crooked. And, like, that's, like, she would curse somebody with the sign of the devil. You know what I mean?
And the only way to block that would be through the mollies.
See, I've never heard that before. Again.
So let's try right now. You try to curse me. Don't. See? You know what I'm saying? And then, of course, like, this became Ronnie James Dio's symbol that he used to do in music, which is why now it's associated with rock music.
Totally didn't know that, but that's amazing.
But I used to have an uncle, Uncle Peter, who all the time would go, "Shagabra, Shagabra," like he was protecting me. And for years I didn't know it. And for a while, I know, if you know me, you know that I'm not a chain person. I don't like jewelry. but I used to actually wear a chain that had the shaka bra.
Oh, you're kidding! That's amazing.
On it. So, you know,
That's
and
awesome.
I didn't even really make the connection, even though I was a metal kid. I never made the connection that when I was doing this, it was the same thing that I was wearing around my neck, and that Uncle Peter used to like torment me with.
That is hilarious.
Although he was trying to protect me, I guess that's not really a torment. But
no, it's sweet.
I never got that he was trying to protect me with it. No.
So, I mean, that's what I mean by like family sayings are just like small things like that. So the devil's always been, or an evil presence has always been, known, talked about,
right?
Not given too much attention to.
Yeah, and so in that way, like other things we've talked about, religion seems to be religion, but the devil seems to be more the person of like folklore. You know what I'm saying? Like a folklore type figure. Even though he's in the Bible, it's clear that he's in there. Like the majority of what we know and we hear about the devil seems to be more in folklore type stories.
Well, right, and what we know in the Bible is totally not how he's representative. It is represented,
right?
You know, so I think I think the devil has evolved to an urban legend in some ways because other people have added their own little bits and pieces along the way.
I mean, if you take something like the 7 deadly sins, they are much more of brought into popular culture from things like Chaucer and things like Dante's Inferno than they ever really are from the Bible itself.
Right,
and
and
even
so
like the 7 different the 7 different faces of the devil and things like that, and Lucifer
and again, like, what is that based upon? That's based upon an author's imagination, but that's been grabbed onto by Hollywood mostly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or other authors that have incorporated their ideas. So the devil has become this new and ever-evolving idea, I think.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not what it was 2,000 years ago, what people probably thought of as evil or the devil that started in the Bible. It's become a whole different thing.
And I think that, like, there was almost like a... growing up for me, there was almost like a trickster element to it. Where it wasn't this, like, malicious...
It was more mischievous?
It was more mischievous. I mean, like, the devil went down to Georgia. Like, you don't get... Even though he's saying, like, I'll bet a fiddle of gold against your soul. Like, he's going to take his soul.
Right.
But the whole soul-stealing aspect of it seemed so much more... you got the impression that the good guy was going to win. I mean, the devil and Daniel Webster... and things like that. Oh, it's great. Can't get into it too much now, but it's basically the devil tempts, a man, and then Daniel Webster has to defend this guy in court, and he has to basically save this guy's soul. The guy sold his soul for something, and it's got this great ending with the devil basically saying, like, what do I care that I lost? I've got people all over the place I'm going to get to.
Gotcha.
I can get him, or I can get him, and the last thing he does is he looks right at the camera and he's like, I can get you. This like very, and it's black and white.
Ooh, it sounds really good.
Scratch, that was his name, Scratch. And he had, the guy was an older gentleman, but there was just something very evil looking about him.
Have you ever seen The Devil's Advocate?
I have seen The Devil's Advocate.
I love that movie.
And it's that same kind of idea of the seductor,
right?
Who kind of pulls tricks. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I mean, I guess that goes back to like the very first story, Adam and Eve. You know what I mean? The devil played a trick. Right. So yeah, I can see why that would take on a mischievous role.
And I think, like, I remember the first. So I used to, I've told this story before on air. I used to, my parents used to drop me off. They didn't drop me off. I used to have to walk to school, from school to the library in the freezing cold, even though it was, there was no aftercare or anything like that, right? And so I couldn't go home.
We're going way back, folks.
Right. Back before there were homes. To the very first public library in the country. No, I used to have to walk from school to the library, and then my mom would pick me up from the library at 5. You know what I'm saying?
Crazy.
So I would be there for 2 or 3 hours. And so I read every single book in the kids section. And 2 of the books that I pulled out, I always remember I used to constantly read. One was about how to be a private detective. Mm-hmm. And the other one was this book of like unusual stories, unsolving mystery.
Do you remember like the titles of them? Those books being so prevalent in your young life. Do you remember what they were?
I think it was something called like Weird Tales or something like that. I actually asked a friend of mine who now works at that library
if it's
still there, and they said, "Well, I do remember the title." I'm like, "Nope." Do you remember what it was called? Nope. I said, "But if you put me in that library, I could point to where it was on the shelf because I used to actually be able to like, I would always go straight there and." It's interesting because it was presented as true. Everything in there was true. And there was everything from aliens to Bigfoot type things. And so many of like the haunted ghost folklore type stuff. Like they're obviously more urban legends than they're true ghost stories. And I remember one of the stories being about a devil's rock. And how a man had out-tricked the devil. And at the last moment, like, the devil went, like, running away, and he had run away, and his feet were on fire, and then, like, they burned into the rock. And so these things were supposedly the devil's footprints.
Oh, cool.
That were in this rock. And I always remembered it because it was in New Hampshire.
Oh.
Where I was living. So it was like, oh, I want to go to Devil's Rock. I want to go to the Devil's Rock and put my foot in there.
Have you ever found it?
Well, no.
Okay.
I'm sure, like, you know, with the intraweb, it wouldn't be too hard for me to find it, but...
I can't believe you've never looked it up.
I'm not in New Hampshire anymore, so... But one of the things that you see, the more research you do, is that every state has a Devil's Rock, you know? And every kind of thing that's mysterious gets attributed to the devil, you know? Mm-hmm. And so there is... you know,
do you think
the
maybe
devil's
it's just
footprint, the devil's handprint, here's where the devil got burned.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Do you think people name it, whoever is in charge of naming these places, name it Devil's Blank because the name the devil is so universally recognizable?
I'm glad you asked, Natalie.
Oh!
Because as I was doing
asked a good question.
As I was doing some of the research for this, I fell back upon an expert.
Okay.
Because as soon as this thing came up, as soon as theme came up, because most of these came from, it was originally started, you know, this idea to do this was from, what's it called, Backpack Verse, had put out something about, you know, 7 places to go in Florida. And 2 of them involved the devil.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, that'd be a great theme for a show, even if you don't end up going to all of them. And it brought me back to, and I know it didn't originally appear in Mysterious America. I know the idea had been around with him for a while, but Lauren Coleman, who we've talked about on this show before,
yes.
has you know, this idea or he's noticed this pattern that he calls the name game, which is that there are so many things that are named for the devil or for other names for the devil. So if you look at, like, the Hockomock Swamp, it translates in Algonquin into the devil.
Really?
The devil's place or something like that.
Oh, I didn't
Now,
know
I'd always
that.
heard it, the place where evil dwells or something like that.
But evil and the devil
that
are
was
synonymous.
Wampanoag.
Right, okay.
The Algonquin translation is actually devil.
Wow.
And so what you find is if you have some place that's named the devil, you know, the devil, for example, we're going to talk about the devil's chair and the devil's tree and the devil's... what usually ends up happening is people can't understand what's going on, and then they name it after the devil. You know? So the weird thing happens is, like, when that kind of stuff exists already on a place before people get there.
So I don't really understand that. I'm a little lost on that statement.
So if you take a place like the Hockomock Swamp, right? The Native Americans who were there before the weird stuff started happening to the settlers had already named it something dark. They'd already named it the place where evil dwells.
Because they had experience?
Because they had experiences. Right.
Okay.
So what you find is that different cultures are looking upon the same weird stuff and they name it after whatever their dark spirit is.
Right.
You know, obviously the Wampanoags didn't have a devil.
Right.
Because that wouldn't necessarily fit into their early belief systems. But they thought it was dark enough, they thought it was evil in their own sense, and so they named it.
Interesting to say or to realize that since the dawn of time, there's always been that evil element. No matter what,
and I think it's, and because the obvious question is, well, do you believe in God and do you believe in the devil? Right? Because you have to believe in one to believe in the other. And I've always kind of, not always, but I think that I'm not sure if the devil exists, but I think there's something elementally dark.
Yeah.
That exists, like a force in nature that is.
So when you think about
malicious.
The devil, you don't see the horns and the pitchfork and fires of hell. And
I much more believe in demons than I believe in the devil. Like I much more believe in like the lower ones than I believe in their boss.
Okay, so what does a demon feel like or look like for you?
I think they all look different.
Okay.
You know, like if you I've got that book that's the different faces of the devil.
Okay.
And even if you look at like Lucifer, right, or the devil, say, and they show you the 7 different types of the 7 different variations of
reading?
it.
Wait, I started reading that. Yeah.
And it's like Leviathan looks completely different from Beelzebub, who looks different from Lucifer, who looks different.
That book also explains the evolution of how each period of time, during each period of time, it became Beelzebub, or you know what I mean, the devil, Satan, Lucifer. You know what I mean?
Well, it talks about how those things are like the different faces of it. Like, in other words, they're completely different entities that all exist at the same time. They're just, one is one is the devil of gluttony.
Gotcha.
The other one is the devil of lust. The other one is the, And so at least from that, and actually I can look at it right here, it's called The Guide to Demons. I can actually see it on my bookshelf.
Your face got a little demonic as you were reading that.
But and that's, we were talking about earlier, like, I honestly feel like if you talk about the devil too much, he's like, what?
But you're saying
he can hear me.
Okay, but look at what you just said. You just said if you talk about the devil too much.
Right.
Wouldn't it be the demons?
No, if you talk about the devil, you're opening yourself up to demons.
I see.
Like it's
So, but you do believe in the boss.
No, I believe in demons. But I'm saying if you talk about the devil, then the demons can come and are attracted to you.
Okay. They
both seduce you.
I see.
So one of the interesting things about the places that you were saying is that, some of them are named because stuff happens there or happened there. But a lot of times there's bad stuff that happens after it has been named. So then you have to wonder whether or not the bad stuff happened because people had the devil in their head when they were there, or whether there's actually something about this place that
elementally evil.
That is elementally evil, that draws bad stuff in, that draws bad people in. So
interesting. And there's no concrete answer to something like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Because the problem is that there are so many things that are named for the devil that you can't get good data. Like if you're trying to look at it like from a collecting data standpoint, you can't get good data because each of them have their own history and their own lives, and so some of them fall into that pattern, but some of them don't fall into that pattern. And
then on the flip side of things, Chris, there's good things that the devil is named after. Devil's food cake.
Devil's food cake is disgusting.
I've never had it.
I'm an angel food cake person, 100%.
There is a swimming hole in Florida called the Devil's Hole.
Where is that?
I don't remember, but it was like a natural spring that people would dive. They closed it off. An owner came and bought the land or whatever and said, no, nobody can come in anymore. But
okay. Do you don't remember where it is? Because maybe it's one of the things we're going to talk about today.
I don't remember off the top of my head. Oh, you have the Devil's Hole.
I don't have the Devil's Hole. But I did see some reference to it, but it was like...
But nothing spooky has happened there. Or nothing dark.
You know what? I couldn't find anything. It's still open.
Oh, it is?
But I couldn't find anything interesting in connection to it that could like fit into some kind of
but you gotta wonder, like,
folklore.
Why are you called the Devil's Hole?
Well, a lot of times, like we'll get into one of them, it's called the Devil's Hole just because weird things are heard there.
Weird things.
And so people were able to, like, we're going to get to the Devil's Hole, for example. And it's one of those things where unexplained noises and things like that. Well, if you're in the Devil's Hole, and it's like, there's noises, you don't know what they are. There's your explanation right there.
It's the devil?
It's the devil.
Oh.
And it's important to note that, like, we can talk about ghosts, and we can talk about making a separation between things like monsters and ghosts and the devil, but early settlers wouldn't have made that separation. You know what I'm saying? It was all, it's like when you look at like witchcraft, right? Witchcraft wasn't witchcraft the way we see it. It was basically some odd variation or some, someone that would have been that time Satan worshipping.
Right.
So if you ask a modern day witch, like, no, the devil doesn't put my name in his book. What are you, crazy? Like, that's not what I believe. I don't even believe in the devil. But there was no separation of that. So anything that was evil or anything that was bad was automatically the sign of that. But, it goes further than just words that have, like, the devil in it. It also has to do with, and this is one of the things Lauren Coleman gets into. So it's in Mysterious America, but you can also go to his website and Cryptomundo, and also the Twilight language probably hits on it more. He has this idea of the Twilight language as in there are words out there and there are phrases out there that are repeated that seem to connect to each other. It's a whole nother episode. But one of the things he talks about is this different variations of the devil's name over time have the locations that are associated with that have had weird things happen more than the places around them. So the most popular example is the word fae.
Fae.
So fae is like what we might think of as like a puck. Like
a hockey puck?
No, like a mythical figure puck. Like a little with like the little horn, little hoofs and the ears, like like Puck from Shakespeare, from Midsummer Night's Dream.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Like a fawn or a
fawn.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
a fawn. The fawn is also called a fae.
I've never heard it called a puck.
Okay.
No.
Well, that comes from Puck from Greek mythology.
Okay.
Like Puck and Pan and stuff like that. Pan is...
I knew Pan, okay. Yes. Okay, yeah.
But also, like, Puck in Shakespeare is a version of Pan, but the words that have Puck, like places that have Puck and Pan, and especially Fae, like Fayetteville, things like that, have a heightened paranormal activity and odd things that happen there. So oftentimes, like when you have, it's supposed to be like, or even people that are involved in weird things have some kind of different variation of Fae or Pan or Puck.
Did Faye Dunaway ever have any issues?
Have you ever seen Faye Dunaway's issues? Have you ever seen Mommy Dearest? Like the most evil movie of all time? What are you kidding me? No, hangers. Like that could be the most evil performance ever in the history of cinema. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely some place to. So it's not only just things that have like the devil's rock or the devil's chair, but
there's also words associated with the devil.
Right.
So what else besides Fae is associated with the devil or Satan?
I don't really remember.
You're supposed to remember everything, Christopher.
Well, it's like I'm trying to think of the name. Like there's a Scratch also does it. And can we edit that part out? You asked me a question. I can't remember all of them.
That's fine.
Okay.
You can edit your boo-boos.
We're going to edit my boo-boos?
We edited like 3 of my boo-boos
okay.
already. So.
I want to edit your boo-boo, baby. So, you can ask me, okay, well, let's talk about where you think we should go, kind of thing.
Well, wait, you have to pause and just go back to where we were.
We don't have to pause. We're going to edit all this out.
I know, but I don't remember the last thing you said before we started talking about.
Just talking all about the names. Be like, enough about the names.
Okay. So
make it so it's easier for me to edit.
So when searching over Florida for like all these different places with the devil, were you also doing like a sub search for places with like the name Fae in it?
I was, and I couldn't find too much Fae, Fawn, or Puck or Pan things here.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll find like. There's a area of a town that's known, like a special area of it that's known as like Pan's Hook. you know, or something like that. And I really couldn't find those kinds of things in Florida.
Really?
Nope.
Interesting. Okay.
So I kind of stuck with the devil.
The devil.
The devil in the
Us
name.
Floridians, we're straight to the point.
We're really straight.
We don't
you know
want
what I'm
any.
saying?
We have to dumb it down for everybody. If we name something Pan's Hook, they're going to be like Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing would be is if, which I didn't do, was do research into, like, what did the Calusa or the Seminole, like, what was their word for evil?
Oh, that's a good.
So that's one thing I didn't do. So maybe that might be something that we follow up with.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, so like you know what the Native American word up is for the Wampanoag.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find that out?
I think that the area itself became so popular that someone then kind of came forward and went like, you know what that means, right? I think it was much more of that kind of situation.
So it's not so much
or
like...
it could have even been like research into it, like exact translation.
Okay.
But I think it came post the Bridgewater Triangle's popularity.
Gotcha.
Like, I don't think it's like, well, everyone knows that it means this. And also, I think it was more of the Bridgewater Triangle and then kind of like, you know, the popularity of that. And you know, it's interesting, like, the word Hockomock as meaning, like, the place where evil dwells, I think goes back to, it goes back to Lauren Coleman, but then it's mentioned in other books, too. And no one has ever really said, like, where that original translation, it's just been repeated so often that people just kind of took it for...
Okay, so you've got to wonder, is it really?
Well,
Does it
and then
really mean that? Have you ever...
And right around the time that I was writing Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle, and Lauren was writing the foreword for it,
okay,
was the first time I had heard that he had actually done research and found that the word was Algonquin,
okay,
for devil or like
evil spirit
or something. Gotcha. Like that, you know.
Okay, cool. So somebody's actually done the legwork to find out what that literal translation is, not just based upon word of mouth.
Right, and it's not as if it's like we need some kind of Rosetta Stone. Like there's still Wampanoag and Algonquins around that can offer that up.
I didn't realize that the Wampanoag were still around.
Yeah, you should read the great book Dark Woods, and you'd find that like in Freetown, like that's where their reservation is. So there's still very much. And if we were in Massachusetts, that would be known because lately they've been in the news for wanting casinos and things like that. So
I've started to read Dark Woods, but I'm only about a quarter into it.
It doesn't get any better.
It's a good book. It terrified me though. Like I got to the part.
I know the grammar is that bad.
It's horrible. No, it's the stories.
I'm only going to be self-deprecating about my books.
The stories in there are terrifying. I couldn't continue after a little bit.
Sorry. Now, the funny thing is most people say it only takes them a little bit to read it.
Really?
Like, oh wow, like I was able to finish it in 2 days, which is not a compliment to a writer. It's like, oh, it's so short that you were able to...
Or it's so good that they couldn't put it down.
So we're moving on.
Okay, we're moving on.
And I'm going to go to our first devil place.
Okay, so this is where... So our listeners, I have no idea the different places that he's about to name that we're going to go. I've done my own research, so I might be familiar with some of them, but I don't know the ones that he's chosen to disclose this evening.
Right.
So continue.
So
please.
the first one doesn't have devil in the name.
Oh, okay.
But it stood out to me. I think I believe this came from Backpack Verse as well. This was an article. But what stood out was that the person is automatically associated with the devil.
Okay.
And I believe the headline read something like, "Wanna have lunch with the devil?"
Mm.
And I was like, okay, he's probably...
Will it be egg salad?
Egg salad, it will be deviled ham and deviled eggs, actually.
There you go.
So this is a cafe in Miami.
A cafe?
A cafe. It is called Wynwood Cafe.
Okay. Nope, never heard of it.
Now, you have to know that Miami scares the hell out of me.
Miami scares you?
Miami, more than any city in the country, scares the hell out of me.
Why?
Like, I'm not overly intimidated by New York. Some people say, like, oh, New York, it's way too big. I'd get scared if I went. Like, I mean, I have no desire to go there, but there's something about Miami scares the crap out of me.
Really?
It's scared, like, It's just the
Have you ever been over there?
No.
Okay.
No, are you kidding
me?
me?
The driving is pretty scary.
Well, right, that, and like, so it's this weird mix of like people like, oh, it's there's a really rich section and there's a really poor section. And there's like, you're in the rich section and you don't feel welcome, and then you're in the poor section and you don't feel welcome. And it's like a weird cloud of like Cuban voodoo that hangs over it in my mind. Like, it's this very like, do not touch, do not go to Miami. Going to Miami? No, Will Smith, you're going by yourself. Like,
that was an old reference. Nobody's gonna get that. Nobody.
Everyone's gonna get that joke.
All right, so no Miami, but Miami. Can you tell me about this? Because I might just go find a different partner that's not terrified of the Cuban voodoo.
Feel free. And actually, that might work out for us.
Oh my God. All right.
Because, so this article, and if you go to Backpack Verse and you just type in, like, Devil Miami. And you can read the story for yourself, because it was equal parts, like, creepy and hilarious.
Okay.
So, this guy goes to this Wynwood Cafe, and he's going on a Tinder date.
He swiped right.
He swiped right. And he was like, wow, this girl's really hot. You know, she's beautiful, whatever. And so they go to this Wynwood Cafe, and he notices that she's not paying attention.
Okay.
And so he's kind of getting discouraged about, you know, why is she not paying attention to me? She seems so interested. And it ended up that it was because the devil was in the corner. The devil was in the corner.
The girl told him this? Or?
She eventually told him, and he turned, and he also saw an evil figure that he equated to be the devil in the corner of this cafe.
So she wasn't paying attention.
She was
now. Wait, let me just wait a minute.
Yes.
So she wasn't paying attention to him. Didn't look terrified or like, let's get the out of here. He was just concerned because she was feeling aloof.
Yes.
And then later she...
Well, no, she seemed to also be nervous.
Okay.
But not like Tinder date nervous.
More so like, we're going to get soul sucked out of here. Gotcha. Okay, so...
And also, if I remember correctly, in the article, it almost seemed like mystified.
Okay.
You know, like under a spell kind of thing.
I see. Okay, right. So like she couldn't say something if she wanted to. Like, couldn't snap
almost
herself
like,
out of it.
Almost like a little bit of that possessed you were talking about earlier.
Gotcha. I've been in that place, that moment where I've been too zoned out to do anything about it. You know
During a Tinder date?
I think it was Plenty of Fish.
Plenty of Fish? Okay.
No.
Right. As we all know, the Plenty of Fish dates are usually much more intense than the Tinder dates. So,
all right,
so I have an email that I sent to the manager, to the general, and the manager, to be like, is this something that has happened before? I have not gotten a reply yet, but that was only like 2 days ago.
Okay.
I haven't gotten a reply yet. I haven't, so I did to like the general email, and then I did it to, because if anything, I wanted to see like, has this been good for business, this article? Has it been bad for business, this article? So.
Can we get a hold of the people that actually saw the dark, devilly figure?
I don't know how much of that site you've read before, but they this name, which isn't the person's real name, which isn't the da-da-da, so I'm sure we can at least contact the people who run that,
right?
And see, because I mean we are, several times we've referenced them and stuff like that, so we are putting their name out there and citing our sources, if you will.
Give credit where credit's due.
Credit where credit's due.
So did they describe what this dark figure appeared like?
Not overly, no. It was just like, there's a dark, creepy figure in the room.
So just more like an omnipresent.
Yeah. And then it was
like,
wonder,
I don't want to talk about the rest of it. Was this like an omen, like, ill-fated match, don't go there, get out, sure to swipe left.
Well, right, and it's like, was it the woman, was it the man, or was it the location? Which is why I kind of called it.
Ooh, interesting. So, okay, so stay on top of that, because that's not a bad idea.
Well, what I figured was...
I might just go on another Tinder date.
I figured you should probably sign up for Tinder. Uh-huh. Or, re-establish your Tinder account. I don't know
if I want Tinder, though. Ugh.
Okay, so we're trying to recreate the original scenario.
Fine.
So you can, you can pay the extra so you can actually be, you can actually be swiping in Miami while you're still here.
All right.
And I think you're probably the better person for this job because I've got that thing against Miami.
And the Cuban voodoo.
And the Cuban voodoo and, like, the bling. It's all just too much for me.
Gotcha.
So
I'm not sure if I have enough cojones to go to a blind date in Miami. I'm not sure if without bringing, like...
Well, it's not like,
bodyguard.
I mean, maybe, like, I'll hang out at, like, Plantation, so if you need me, like, I can be there.
I'm 20 minutes away.
Right. So...
Okay, next.
So, the next one has got to be the Devil's Millhopper.
What is a millhopper?
Okay, so a millhopper, as far as I can tell, is like a funnel that they would, like, feed grain through.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like, looks like a funnel, and they would put the grain in, and it somehow, I don't know whether it got purified or whether it got, like, cut up or something like that.
Gotcha.
And then was distributed. But
something to use with a mill.
Right, at a mill.
At a mill.
Uh-huh. And the hopper was just kind of like the nickname for it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
a tool used by the millers.
yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Or in a mill.
With the devil.
Well, the devil doesn't use all mills. Because the devil's millhopper actually has nothing to do with grain or mills or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
It just, there's a part of it that just has that funnel formation.
I see.
So this is, and I got this mainly from Haunted Places.
Okay.
But I think
I love that site.
Right.
It's a wealth of information.
But I was able to kind of follow it back up on other sites as well, and kind of did I've got like 20 pages printed out of the Devil's Millhopper stuff. Mm-hmm. But it is a sinkhole. What is more uniquely Florida than a sinkhole?
Than a sinkhole. Those
right?
are terrifying. Things that are in my nightmares.
I know, and you know what? I'm reading the book Tangerine with my kids, my students, and it was funny. I think when I first moved here was when there were like 2 that happened. Yeah. And I was like, I don't get it. What is a sinkhole like? And people were like, what? And it was actually like people had died. Yeah. And I'm like, what?
Disappear into the earth. That's crazy.
So that happened. Well, there's no confirmation that happened in modern times. Okay. Although people say that it has. But it's 120 feet deep and 500 feet wide. So it's a huge area, right? So it's like bigger than a football field, right? We would imagine. And so it goes deeper than...
at sea level. So is it filled with seawater?
No.
You know what I mean?
It is. I mean, there's parts of it that are...
where is the Devil's Millhopper?
It is outside of Gainesville.
Okay, so north.
So north.
So maybe a little bit.
Maybe that 200 feet, right? Yeah. And when the people went there originally, so it's a natural sinkhole that's been, well, not that all sinkholes are natural, I guess, but it's been there for thousands of years. Oh, so this is not one that formed that was new, but when people went there, they found bones and fossils. Inside the sinkhole. And that's kind of like what the sinkhole is known for now. People go there and they kind of can explore, these areas that were mined for fossils. But people didn't know what those things were.
Right. So were they human fossils or animals? That's going to be my
There were animal bones and animal fossils. Okay. There were dinosaurs. Oh. And older animals. But people didn't know what they were because this was before people knew that dinosaurs existed, so they just naturally assumed that they were monsters.
Before Jurassic Park.
Right, much before. And because, like, the sinkhole also had, because there was layers of it, also had things that they thought were human remains, they naturally thought that the devil just kind of, like, part of these bones were monsters, but then also that the devil was taking things down into this hole and eating them. Oh, wow. And so that's how it became known as the Devil's Millhopper, because the formation of it was like that.
I can understand that. Old Florida, you don't have access to outside world, outside information. All of a sudden, you stumble upon this sinkhole. Right. There's fossils.
And there's things in there that you don't understand. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be if we came upon an animal that we didn't know, we would associate with what we knew. Well, they knew the devil. They knew monsters. So then it's naturally we're like...
Makes sense.
And it is known as a portal to hell.
Ooh. How do you get to hell from the sinkhole?
Well, you're already halfway there because you're in Florida to begin with, I guess. But, that portals... Well, they think that in the sinkhole things open up. Okay. And so
vortex?
So vortex again coming up. Coming up in one of our shows. So they think that if you go there and at a certain time and all this stuff, or your incantation, or the devil wants it, something will open up, and then you'll get sucked straight into hell from this.
Okay.
From this portal.
So is that more so to scare the little kids from going into the devil's hole, or?
No, I think that's an interesting idea, though.
You know what I mean? But if it's been there for hundreds and thousands of years, we're never going to find the true answer of how this originated. You know what I mean?
So were you saying that you think that it originated from the devil?
No. I'm saying the story surrounding it.
Oh, well, there are some references that they have.
Okay.
So one of the things that they say is, so now we're talking, I don't know what that would be. That's in Gainesville, so would that be Seminoles? Up in that area?
I wish that I knew my Florida history, but
I always think of northern Florida as being
mommy brain is
Seminole country.
Hold on. I will tell you because now I want to know.
Okay.
In order for us to know what we're
How about if I
about.
continue the story and you look it up?
Okay.
All right, so the devil fell in love with one of the Native American women.
Okay.
And so he was in that area, kidnapped her.
Ooh.
And so the whole tribe kind of gathered up and was chasing the devil and trying to get rid of the devil. And that the devil created this sinkhole to swallow up the people that were...
Wow.
Right. And so he sucked them into this hole, and then he turned them into stone. And that's why this area, which is now, it's open to the public, has weird rock formations, and maybe even some of these bones that they found were of the braves who had, been in the chase of the devil, and then...
I wonder where that originated, though. Where did that come from?
Well, it's once again, like, we've hit upon that other theme of,
that.
like, things that are not explained, or things when weird things happen. Mm-hmm. People are often, like, there's a beautiful Indian princess.
Right.
We came across that with the manatee, the singing river.
Right.
And things like that.
I was going to comment how it seems like they kidnap a lot of their women.
Or a lot of their women get kidnapped.
Right.
Did you find out which tribe?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Seminoles, definitely the Miccosukes here. I'm not sure, unfortunately. I don't know the geography.
Okay, I think you made up that second name, but that's okay.
Miccosukee?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
We've talked about this before.
I've never said or heard the word Miccosukee before.
Miccosukee Indians, yeah.
Okay.
We've talked about it because the Miccosukee tribe is like the alligator going across the alley to the Cuban voodoo place of Miami.
All right.
There's a whole section that's Miccosukee Reservation.
So that's more southern then.
That's more southern.
That's more southern.
Well, I mean, now.
Right. Oh, I get what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Who knows where they were originally?
I know, and, once again, we had talked about, like off air just one time about my son doing a project and how the Calusa were taking over other tribes.
Right, exactly.
And even though I don't know what those tribes are, maybe we have to consult that 500 Nations book.
Yeah, that was
later.
A really cool book.
So
we should really delve more into, and maybe we'll make that like a month-long project here soon. Actually, I'd like to do it when we go back for that Indian...
For the Singing River?
Right, exactly.
That might be a good time for it,
and maybe just like go through the Florida tribes that were here originally that we knew about, that Calusa took over, that Seminole took over.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or that just dissipated.
Right, because, when I first moved here, I had like, that's adorable. You have Native Americans too. Aw. And so I never really got into...
We call him a masshole.
So I know, but I'm changing them, like, oh wow, there's actually a rich history of Native American culture in this area that, like, needs to be tapped into.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely it does. I agree.
So
I would love to delve further into that. And I think we touch upon it here in Florida education, but not as much as it deserves.
I think the younger grades do. Like, I remember Devin having to make a Calusa mound.
Yeah.
Like a shell mound and everything like that, so.
But again, it's just focusing on, like, the Calusa. There's more than just the Calusa. So, okay, so anyways.
So, I'm kind of torn.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure if it's tomorrow, but based on the moon tonight, I'm not sure if tomorrow night is a full moon.
Do you want me to look that up?
Well, we don't have to look that up right now.
Okay.
But they say on a full moon that you can hear screams and moans coming from the hole.
Oh.
And that's part of the reason why it got the devil's name as well.
Shut up, you're kidding.
Right. Now, I don't know if they allow you to go into a sinkhole
I don't think so.
All I know is that, the moon is out pretty early, so that's something that we should probably check, like when that...
You know what we could do? If it is, we could send a tape recorder down into the sinkhole. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
no?
Totally.
No?
Why are you looking at me as if there's some secret code in that?
There's not a secret code, but I just want you to be on the same wavelength.
No, I'm totally on the same wavelength.
That way we don't endanger ourselves bodily.
Well, it also seems like this is a cool place where people go.
Oh.
Like most of the people who go to the Devil's Millhopper are not. Yeah, they're not going there to be like, let's touch the devil. Okay. They're going there because like there are activities there and things like that. It's a state park.
Gotcha.
So,
which we learned closes at dusk. So, state parks, folks, close at dusk. Yes. You cannot get in after that.
As we found out when we tried to uncover the singing manatee river myth. In the 1880s, a family claimed that they saw it open up more and swallowed trees. Yes,
swallowed
in the 1880s. Mm-hmm.
So maybe the circumference has just gotten bigger, and it's like every 200 years.
Well,
on a full moon, it becomes swallows.
Well, here's the quote from one of the witnesses.
Okay.
The ground began rumbling like Satan himself was coming out of the earth. Then a big frightening hole opened up, swallowing trees, rocks, and at least one liquored up sinner.
Ooh! Had to be a sinner.
Had to be a sinner.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Couldn't have been like swallowed up Joe, the good church going.
He never says like, and I saw the horns coming out of the hole. So maybe he was misinterpreting, because I'm sure if you saw a sinkhole happen and you didn't know what a sinkhole was, it would seem as if like,
the earth is eating us. Yeah.
Like, what have we done to offend you?
Right.
And grabbing virgins and bringing them in.
I was just going to
like
say
that.
the same thing.
And so what actually ended up happening after that for a little while was that evangelists would use it to preach.
Oh, gosh,
so they would bring their congregations out to the sinkhole and leave these
donate
like...
$200, I'm throwing you.
Well, I was thinking more of like, right in our grasp we have the devil. See this hole? This hole is our sin. It gets bigger by every infraction.
Did you used to preach for an evangelical church?
No. Not a preacher. Not a preacher.
You sure?
I'm
guaranteed. Billy?
I might have, I guess. I think I always would have been a really good preacher.
I think that you would have been
like,
a great
even
preacher.
if I didn't believe in God, I could go up there and be like, I feel him. Like, I could have done that. But
you could have done that.
Alas, not my calling. So, put a pin?
Not yet, anyways.
Put a pin, would you say? Or is that interesting to you at all? Or I'm not sure what the trip would be.
To see if we hear moans coming from the hole?
Right, like I'm not sure if it would involve us having to go there and preach.
Maybe.
Or look for liquored up people.
I mean, okay, so from the brief introduction that you've given me, I don't see any paranormal with that, but it is a good urban legend.
Well, there's the moaning, and there's the screaming. So
okay. When was the last account of that?
From what I heard, it was fairly frequent. I mean, fairly recent.
Okay, well,
like that's a thing that people go and hear.
Put a pin in that one. It's interesting.
Put a pin.
Let's see. Yeah,
and it is Gainesville, so it's one of those things where if we were talking like the summer trip, it's like the gateway out of the state.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it might be an interesting place to hit, like on the road to travel. So maybe not a trip in and of itself, but some place to hit
on the way.
On the way.
Mm-hmm.
The next one. Is the Devil's Tree.
I think I read about this
you
one.
Probably
it's
did.
on the other coast, right?
Yes, it's on the east coast. It is in Oak Hammock Park in Port St. Lucie.
It's pretty close to Miami. There might be Cuban voodoo.
It's nowhere near Miami whatsoever, other than the fact that it's on the west coast.
I just wanted to throw in the Cuban voodoo.
No, because I checked the distance between Miami and Port St. Lucie.
But how far?
No matter where I am,
does a cloud of Cuban voodoo stretch?
I guess we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay. But there is a 150-year-old oak.
Okay.
And this oak was named everything that I'm going to say now. Everything I've read, it was named the Devil's Tree before then. Before the stuff that I'm going to talk about now. Now, I've read maybe 5 or 6 different accounts of this stuff all over the place, all over the internet.
Okay.
And I've found conflicting information. And so what I'm going to pose to you is kind of like a collection and a combination of those things.
Okay.
With my own kind of analysis of it.
Shoot.
So what I'm going to present to you is the way that I understand the legend.
Okay.
Okay? So in 1971, Gerald John Schaefer, who was known as the Killer Deputy, right? He was, they think that he killed 2 female hitchhikers there.
Ooh, this also involves hitchhikers.
Yes. They were 2 19-year-olds. They were bound, gagged, raped, and then hung from the tree. Now, here's where things start to get confusing. Oh, it's also reported that he would unbury them, that he then buried them there, like hang them, went back after they were dead and buried them.
Okay.
And then that he would occasionally dig up the bodies and have sex with them.
Oh, that's nasty. That's
I know.
horrific.
I know.
Okay.
Now, in 1977, the bodies were found.
Okay.
Now, I was doing research on this Gerald John Schaefer, and it seems like the story that arose about the tree comes from, like, different things that he did. Like, he definitely was accused of a crime where he hung these 2 women. Like, he seemed to like to kidnap people in groups of 2.
So he had
and
done
they
it before?
escaped. Yes, they had escaped, and they reported him. And that's why he lost his... why he lost being a deputy.
But didn't go to jail?
No. And then it also seems like in another location that he killed people and killed women and hung them from a tree.
Oh my God, where?
Also in that same area. Like in that same area, but not where the devil's tree is.
Wow.
So then when they dug up these things and they found them, they naturally assumed it was him. Mm-hmm. And he was charged and convicted with other crimes and went to jail and ended up being stabbed in jail.
Good.
So someone killed him in jail.
He died in jail, but good that he went to jail.
Yes, he went to jail. And so there seems to be like, okay, well, here's this crime and here's a potential serial killer. They were never able to connect him exactly. From what I remember, they searched his apartment and they found items that they then realized were these women's who were underneath the tree. So some of the details are a little bit foggy on what exactly he did, what he got convicted with. But this tree has definitely become the focal point of Killer Deputy Gerald John's legacy.
Okay.
Shortly after the bodies were found and shortly after he was sent to jail, people started to notice that there seemed to be cults that were fixated on this tree. And so they would find satanic activity there, they would find burnt offerings, they would find things carved into the ground near it, as if satanic cults were trying to harness the energy from this tree.
Was this tree now protected because it had been a crime scene, or you know what I mean?
I don't think it was protected for that long. You know what I'm saying? Like how long does a crime scene last? You know. Mm-hmm. But that's okay because you can't cut it down. Right. No, I mean you literally can't cut it down.
Oh, people have tried to cut it down.
People have tried to cut this tree down.
And what happens?
Their saws break.
No way.
Yes.
So
they actually, well, it's my intention to. We have plenty of stuff from Tinker Academy to try to get that done.
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome.
At least if we can get a portion of it.
Right.
And you have to think that there are probably there that are like, have tried this before to get pieces of it. Like, that's the ultimate challenge. Like, this tree can't be, oh, really?
Right.
Because here's my jackhammer.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe it's just the city's way of trying to get a tree cleared out for free. No.
Well, people have witnessed this, that people like try to saw through it and the saws break and things like that. Okay. And they tried to perform an exorcism on the tree. Okay. Which is the first time I heard that, like people actually performing an exorcism on something natural like that. And so they put all these crosses on it, and the crosses all fell. Like, they couldn't keep a cross on this tree. They would fall off.
Oh, these are all things that we have to try.
Yes.
Okay, so are we gonna we're gonna trip this? I'm already very interested in this.
Okay, so this is a definite one we should do. It's Port St. Lucie. It's about 3 hours away. Well, you know, you gotta go, you know, down the path if you want to see the devil.
All right, let's do it.
So that's definitely a pin.
That's definitely, let's go do that.
That's definitely right. And so when you're there as well, you hear screaming, you hear like whimpering, you hear all these weird noises. People have said they've been touched. They felt they've been touched.
Is this
they,
like in an open field or a forest or in a cemetery? Or?
It is in a park. So, I mean, Oak Hammock State Park. So it means it's got to be there before sundown. And I think it's definitely someplace that we should go.
There you go. All right, so this podcast has taken two left turns, if you will. Left being the way that we're traveling, east somehow left is east, which doesn't make sense to me. But also left being the traditional demonic side, of course, where we get the word, what do you call it? Totally gonna, come on! Left-handed means sinister. Sinister means left-handed.
So people that are left-handed are sinister?
I say it all the time to my students. They go, no, I'm not! And I say, it just means left-handed. What?
So what about people that are ambidextrous? A little bit of sinister, a little bit of good?
So they're a little bit of rock and roll, a little bit of country. So the two left turns are this. One, we intended this to be strictly a preview podcast of several different locations. But instead, we are actually going on, we're on our way right now to the Devil's Tree.
In Port St. Lucie, Florida.
Port St. Lucie, Florida. So we're traveling across the state. We're in Moorhaven right now.
Okay.
And we are progressing left through Moorhaven. So we're going to do we're going to split it up into two different shows. So this show is going to be kind of like the preview of the ones we had up until the Devil's Chair. So at Oak Hammock Park, which is where we're headed right now. And then the rest of what we're going to talk about, we'll talk about in episode either 8 or 9, depending on how we want to play it out. Because we're probably going to record tonight the episode of the other location. So we might be so amped up that instead of doing that, we record the feedback one for the actual legend trip. So it'll play itself out to one way or the other.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So I think we should backtrack for a moment and just talk about this morning.
Well, we need to talk about the second left turn.
Okay, all
right. The second left turn, the second turn this podcast is taking is you'll probably notice a lack of quality in the recording here. And that is twofold. One is because we're in the car driving, but the other is why.
So we charged the laptop computer that we typically do our podcast on, that we use to record.
We charged it all night.
All night long.
All night long.
Put it in the bag to go. Everything was good. It was charged when we left the house. We're driving to the Devil's Tree, and strangely enough, it won't turn on.
It won't turn on.
The battery is dead.
It's completely drained. So we haven't even reached the location of activity, and already the equipment is draining on us.
And you will see from earlier Facebook posts that we've already were given a sign that we had to go do this today, which was we were eating at the Go-Go Diner, our go-to place in Cape Coral, before our venture across the state. And what came on, Christopher?
Well, you started reading about
Casadega,
which is the subject of our next trip, which we're probably going to hit either tonight or tomorrow.
Right.
And immediately as you were reading it, in the diner, Stairway to Heaven came on.
Right.
So,
which, if you are listening to this, obviously, you know that we were just talking about that last night.
Right. We were talking about it in this podcast.
Right.
In this episode. So, it was very freaky. There have already been a few other signs. We saw we were behind for about 10 miles a cooling company.
No, it was
an AC company.
No, it wasn't. It was a water company.
It was a water company, and there was a water wizard, and their the symbol on their truck that we were looking at for about 10 miles was very much like I thought, very much like the Led Zeppelin old man wizard on it. And then Natalie went right down a rabbit hole of Aleister Crowley, and so that just
I was silent for a few minutes.
It killed the first leg of the trip.
As I was reading about Aleister Crowley.
And I was listening to Ozzy Osbourne.
So we've got devil on the brain for sure.
Right. And it also is, worth noting, even though it's changed now, that in the interim in between me listening to a little Iron Maiden, a little Ozzy Osbourne, Mr. Crowley, we were listening to the Red Sox playing the Rays, which were formerly the Devil Rays.
Oh, you're kidding. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So it's all coming together.
It's all coming together. Lots of different signs pointing us this way.
So
left.
So this was to the left.
Left.
To the left, to the left, to the left. So why don't we then use the remainder of this episode to talk about some of the other stuff we found last night researching this place?
Okay.
And maybe kind of what our plan of attack is going to be when we get there.
Okay. So our plan of attack for the first trip, which is the Devil's Tree in Oak Hammock Park in Port St. Lucie, Florida. So Chris has already given me the background for this, which I guess is the main reason why this Devil's Tree has become the Devil's Tree, or why it's given that name, that moniker.
Although we still don't know whether it was called the Devil's Tree before all
prior to that. Yeah, I haven't found anything about that. So in the 70s, there was the deputy that killed these women. I've gotten a couple of different articles that said that he was a serial killer, killed multiple women, up to like 34 victims. And then there's other articles that focus on these two 19-year-olds that were either buried under the tree in shallow graves or in a canal or somewhere near the tree.
So I should also mention that when I was doing my research, they said something about Ted Bundy actually writing in his journals and stuff about being inspired by this guy, or in interviews like afterwards in jail,
crazy.
Talking about how he was. And of course, he ended up being caught in Florida trying to perform a double murder because he had never done a double murder. He was caught in Florida on the campus of FSU. Was it? It was FSU. It was either FSU or UF.
Okay.
He wasn't caught on the campus, but he was caught.
On the campus.
Yeah, right. Well, he did the murders on the campus and took off after he had escaped because he was already in jail.
Yeah, I had no idea. I don't know Ted Bundy's history, just these general ideas.
And I know a little too much of it. Well, it's in Lake Forest.
We're now in Lakeport, Florida. Okay, so several different, rumors, accounts. I read an article in mine that was detailing how, like, in recent history, so it's as recent as 2009 is the last account that I could find, and that was a couple of young ladies heard screams coming from the bathroom that's in this Oak Hammock State Park, and so they called the police, and nothing was ever found. People have reported cold spots. Just general screaming can be heard in the park. They said that you could see a shadowy figure darting through the woods or following you.
And they equated it to not as if it were like a shadow person or like a demonic-y, demon-y, ghosty, ghouly kind of thing, but rather that it was someone in dark robes.
Okay.
So at least that's how they presented it online in this account. So it wasn't as if the thing was dark itself, but that it was wearing like a dark cloak.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of articles that I've read, too, took directly from newspapers in the early 90s.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So this is not just something that is, like legend, it's passed on, but these are actually newspaper reports that are...
Well, newspaper reports that are, I would say, circling around the idea of this tree being demonically possessed or having to do with the devil, just evil in general.
Okay.
And so the owner of the land, prior to it becoming public property, didn't want this tree cut down, but was also getting sick and tired of, I guess, satanic rituals were being performed there.
Okay.
Or people were trying to perform satanic rituals there. So he said, don't cut it down. So he placed a big cross here at this tree. It was like an 8-foot tall cross, I'm pretty sure.
8-foot tall, I remember you reading.
Right. So then there's a couple of different reports, and the newspaper does not, the newspaper articles do not specify on this. A couple of different reports say one, like a year later, the cross was turned upside down.
Okay.
Right?
So the newspaper reports that this person actually went in and tried to exercise it. And
right,
cross
exactly.
So a newspaper actually reported this.
They actually reported
okay.
Palm Coast, I believe it was called.
Palm Coast, okay.
Okay. They actually reported that some of the parishioners of the local religious organization that was in that area at the time, I don't think they gave the denomination what it was, that they had gathered around this tree to try and perform an exorcism, that they tried to get rid of this before they placed the cross there. I don't think it worked. That's why they placed the cross there. Like I said, some reports say like a year later the cross was turned upside down. Some say it just got knocked over. And then the next report is, in the newspaper article, I think maybe a couple of years later, and we're talking the early 90s still, is that the city now owns the park, or the land, and they turned it into a public park. And they wanted to cut down the tree. And you had touched on this yesterday a little bit, but I actually got it, like, confirmed. Because, you know, like you were saying, a lot of these stories that we found online have just been kind of cut and paste the same story over and over. But the newspaper article actually described that the city had hired a subcontractor to come in there and cut this tree down, and that all of their electronic their gas-powered chainsaws wouldn't work. It wouldn't turn on.
And this is once again a newspaper reporting.
Right.
Okay.
Or so it seems online anyway. You know, that's what the reference is.
Okay.
It's from a newspaper. Okay. I haven't actually gone and pulled old articles. We just didn't have the time to do that.
Right.
But it would be something interesting to do. So the chainsaws wouldn't turn on. The workers returned with more unused chainsaws, thinking that it was just mechanical failures, and they wouldn't turn on. Okay. Then they returned with one of those long two-people saws.
Yep.
And the teeth fell off of the saw.
The teeth fell off of
the saw while trying to cut through this tree.
That's crazy.
So that itself is just like, wow, that's weird. So the city decided to leave it alone. I also read...
Now, what did they say in the article, that they wanted the tree down because legend trippers were going there, satanic rituals, like they just wanted to make it so that people stopped going there for that? Or was there any other thing that was wrong with the tree, or that the...
Nothing, no, it wasn't like it was a physical issue to have the tree there. Okay. It was more so the attraction. You know what I mean? They wanted to get rid of that.
So
that's the way it seemed anyways.
Do you remember what year this was from?
I can look it up really quick.
No, that's fine. I mean, I guess what I was wondering is, was it a case of legitimately there being like, these people are going into the woods and worshiping around this tree, and we want to get rid of that? Or whether it was people like us going there to be like, is there something here?
I think it was more the latter.
More legend trippers.
That's what I think.
Okay.
But, you know, again, it's really not clear, and it's not like this person said this person did that. It's more so, hang on, I'm actually going to read it to you.
I mean, we're talking about 1977 is when the murders happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking 40 years?
Right.
This is a fairly new legend, and already there's and a 40-year legend that kind of goes through the beginnings of the digital age. And so we're really looking at a legend here that is benefiting from the spread through social media, through the internet, through things like that.
And different little pieces are getting attached to it.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, here's this thing that happened, and it would be interesting. It's interesting that that's having a direct impact. That's kind of the nature of tripping on legends, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, they actually want to go in and take down this harmless tree because it's drawn so much publicity.
Right.
And that's the same kind of thing that we're going to encounter when we talk about the devil's chair.
So I have this right here. So I pulled this back up.
Which site is this from?
This is from...
We like to cite our sources here.
Right. The Grimm Society, which are forensic historians and paranormal investigations. And it's an active site up until, like March 2017. This was actually from 2007. This is a 10-year-old article.
It's a 10-year-old article.
10-year-old article where she pulled what's the name of she? Tamara. Tamara pulled a couple of different articles from the Palm Beach Post.
Okay.
The one that I'm going to read to you is about how the owner at the time decided not to have it cut down. So the article states, a 150-year-old oak tree slated for the chopping block because of folklore tying it to evil will not be raised. The tree's owner said Friday. Instead, an 8-foot wooden cross will be erected near the tree to warn devil worshippers. So they associated devil worshippers with folklorists there, that they're not welcome on the southwest Leafy Road. That's where the tree is. Okay. So Alan Wireman, who is the administrator of the children's shelter that owns the 30-acre tract of land. That owned, right. So that was March 6th, 1993.
93. Okay.
93.
All right. So in 20 years, in 15 years, a little over 15 years, it had become popular enough without the spread via internet. Mm-hmm. Weren't actually going in and taking the tree down.
Well,
like that was a debate. Whether or not to. Yeah. Right.
So then,
can I just say one of the creepiest or weirdest or unusual things that I've ever experienced is we're on this road, and I'm tempted to pass a Trans Am, which is not going as fast as me. I'm just going to throw that out there. I am behind a Trans Am that is going the speed limit. All right, continue. Sorry.
All right. So the next paragraph states the land in which the devil's tree grew eventually found its way into the hands of the Parks and Recreation Department of Port St. Lucie. So, and as the story goes, and they don't really cite any specific source for that story, it says that the employees were instructed to cut the tree down in preparation for the land becoming a public park. So they wanted to cut it down due to its actual physical presence.
Now,
maybe. I mean, who knows?
Can interrupt you?
Yeah.
Because we're going to have to check this when we stop.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a librarian in Port St. Lucie tell me about this.
Really?
I think this is one of the things that
I don't remember you ever mentioning it prior.
I think it is. I think if we search my email for the name hammock or for the word hammock, we're going to find a reference like, there's this thing. We're going to have to do that because now, for some reason, it just clicked in my head. But I think in the early days of us sending those dealer emails out, that I did get a response from Port St. Lucie about this story.
Neat.
So I'm going to have to go back and check.
The library was open on Saturday.
Well, it is Port St. Lucie, so who knows?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I would love to be.
I know nothing about Port St. Lucie. Isn't it the home of the Mets? So the Mets are playing in Port St. Lucie. So maybe we'll have an opportunity to interview Tim Tebow while we're here.
Maybe we can take him to the Devil's Tree with us.
Because if you're going to go to the Devil's Tree,
Bible in hand,
the one person you want to go with is Tim Tebow.
Absolutely.
It is.
You're not kidding.
I feel safe in Tim Tebow's arms.
Oh, God. Hashtag Tim Tebow.
Hashtag Tim Tebow, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that'll get us some attention.
Right? No kidding. So, anyways, back on track of the Devil's Tree. So after reading those things, I delved a little bit further into the different articles and how this legend has evolved over the past 40 years that it has existed. And it's only because of the murders that existed there or that happened there. You know, who knows what the stories were before, if there were any. You know, that I would love to be able to find that out. Who knows?
I know, so I would say that if we're there, or when we get there, that we should ask a park ranger.
I think
something like that. Like, the worst thing you can do is say, like, we don't talk about that.
Right.
But, maybe he'll actually say, like, because I would like to, in addition to tripping it, I would like to be able to speak to someone when we get there, talk to someone when we get there about how has this impacted the park.
Right. Are we seeing more visitors? What kinds of visitors? You know what I mean?
Right.
And, a lot of people have gone there. I mean, if you search this on YouTube, there's a plethora of different people that have gone and essentially tripped this.
Right.
One guy even had a ghost hunting app.
He had a ghost hunting app that was... yeah. we don't like to pass. I don't like to pass judgment. Maybe you're judgmental.
I'm a little judgmental.
It was hard not to pass judgment on that. You know what I'm saying? So, but anyway, you can check out the YouTube videos. You're not going to link them. Maybe we'll make a playlist.
Maybe, absolutely, yeah.
Our YouTube channel.
Compare and contrast. Like, which one did you like better?
I mean, because if people are interested in the subject, then they should have, should give them access
as many resources as possible.
Yeah.
You know.
Cool.
So it's a popular thing, and I've even read a couple of threads that where people from out of state have heard about this tree. You know what I mean? So it's not just a local legend that just the locals know about. It's international or at least national.
And there are other. If I was on my game last night, we would have done this in the first part of the podcast. But there are a lot of trees like this.
I just saw it in New Jersey.
Right, you saw the one in New Jersey, and the theme of it is hanging. And usually it ends up being like witches who are hung from some place or anything like that. So there's a hanging tree in Salem. There's a hanging tree on the infamous.
I've heard that before.
On the infamous Dudley Road in Middlesex County. I can't remember the town off the top of my head, which I've written about before. And so this idea of something hanging from the tree and then the tree somehow becoming cursed by it.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, and take this even deeper than just the idea of a haunted tree or a tree that makes bad things happen or bad things happen around it because of it. I mean, a tree is a living thing, so it makes sense that a negative energy, if something bad were to happen there, a negative energy would be associated and drawn into the tree's energy. You know what I mean? It's a living thing.
So you think a tree could become possessed?
Absolutely. Why not?
Okay.
You have haunted objects. Why wouldn't a tree count as a haunted object?
Well, I mean, I guess in that regard it can, but usually haunted objects are not possessed by something. They're usually being manipulated by something. Like, so in other words, there's a spirit there that is using that object to connect to the living.
It's not actually in the object?
It's not actually necessarily in the object. There are people that will argue with that, too.
To the object? I mean, we've had this discussion
in most cases. I mean, I think that, like, if there's something and maybe it's a certain kind of metal or a certain kind of stone, then maybe something can get trapped in.
Why not wood? Wood is an elemental
because
thing.
Wood doesn't conduct electricity. Right, so a coin could somehow trap a recording.
I see.
Like that.
So because it's wood.
I mean, this is pseudoscience, so we're
No, I understand.
But it is
I don't
it's a living
that.
thing, but not a sentient thing.
I don't
believe it doesn't have a consciousness.
I don't believe
unless it's that tree from the giving tree, and I don't even want to get into it. I'll start crying right here on the road.
Don't, because the Trans Am is still in front of me.
I know.
All right, so, but think about, like, haunted desks, haunted furniture. Do you know what I mean by that? So, like, a person buying a desk from a thrift store, or a clock, or something wooden, and a spirit is attached to it.
Okay,
you know?
I'm not going to you.
You know what I'm saying? So why is it different to think that the tree, which is alive, that it's still growing, you know what I mean, couldn't trap
it somehow.
Right, exactly. Or at least be affected by the negative energy. Like we've talked about how maybe it's not so much, maybe it's just like a reoccurring haunting. You know what I'm saying? Just the energy of it, and it's just a negative energy.
You're talking like a residual haunting.
A residual haunting, yes, thank you. And maybe that's what these types of things are, is because something bad and heated and emotional happens near or on them, that the tree has absorbed that energy.
Right. So I guess I can give you that, because there are also things like suicide trees where people have hung themselves, and when the people go there, they feel that same sadness.
Right.
And they contemplate suicide even if they're not in a suicidal place before they go.
Well, there you go. There's a lingering energy
somehow is there. I'm not sure if it's and I guess lingering in the air is as good as lingering actually within the tree.
Right.
So we don't necessarily know how these things are trapped, but it's somehow, there's a connection to it.
So here's another great little tidbit that I read. I guess on this path in this park, there are at least 4 old oak trees that fit the bill of this devil's tree.
Okay.
So there's 4 of them. Now, I guess in one of these trees there are satanic markings carved in, or at least what people think are satanic markings. And in one of the trees, people have chipped away at it so much, taking pieces of it with them, which I'll get to another little interesting bit that I read about in a moment. So that's how they distinguish it, or because people have chipped away at it.
That's nice of them.
Right?
That's nice of them to be like,
a
hey,
marker. This is...
Just so you know, don't go to the other trees. This is the evil tree.
But in doing that, are they really skipping over the true evil tree?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, like it's just, and it no longer becomes the devil's tree, it becomes what people think is the devil's tree.
Right.
And then now if there's activity there, is there activity there because people are drawn to...
Right, exactly. Or is it people that are bringing the activity there, like with whatever they're carrying?
That's what I'm saying,
yeah.
Right.
So I think we should trip all 4.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I don't think, what are we going to do? What's our plan to trip this tree?
Well, I want to try to get some audio to see if we can hear the screams.
Okay.
And other than that, there doesn't seem to be necessarily a ritual associated or connected to this at all. Right? Like no one necessarily is like, it's not like you say, mini lights come out tonight or anything like that, right? So it seems more of it's just going to be a sit and try to observe.
Okay.
Right? And try to get the audio, try to get some audio.
Okay.
I don't know, we were so successful last time getting EVP. It's kind of, we don't want to get too much into, the scientific, investigating of it so much.
Well, I think we have to more so go with the legend just based upon the hooded figure, the screams, the rope that you can sometimes see hanging there.
So I had suggested us hanging here.
Right, which I slightly declined. I have this thing with rope around my neck. It's just not good. It's not.
Right, and I guess in some way also, like, how respectful is that to the people who
actually done it?
Now, one thing I was reading last night, and I was getting at this in the first part of the podcast, is there are all these different stories and rumors about this, and what I heard was that supposedly the murders in the body weren't even found at that tree. They were found somewhere completely different in Marion County, but because he had been associated with this tree and maybe he had, this was where the first set of girls were found, or they had escaped from, that it got associated with this tree that they found. They buried, he buried the girls under this tree.
So maybe this is a burial site, not necessarily the murder site?
It might have been one of the other murders that he did or something like that.
Well, I don't think we know.
Keep in mind, he did have 2 that escaped. So I'm not sure if it's the ones that had escaped that were...
Did you actually read about his case? Like, did you go into that at all?
I did, and it's really confusing.
Really?
Because there are conflicting stories online, and, it is kind of like, there were 2 girls here. And the problem is that he seemed to have a thing for 2, like we talked about. And so some of it's like, nope, we're saying he did this here, but he got caught for this one. While he was serving time in jail, they found evidence for this one. And so the murder part is really kind of muddy.
Well, I think, and that's the problem with researching online, is that you've got to really hunt for credible sources.
Right.
There's just there's a vast amount of information. And you really have to delve into things to find out if it's credible or not, to find out if it's legitimate.
Right.
Because, I could write all day long about this murder, and, somebody might take that for legitimate information, when really I have no idea.
I think oddly enough, where I got the majority of the information was, because these people are obsessed,
right.
Was a site about serial killers.
I see.
Those people are generally, I know that's really weird to think of, but because they're investigating or they're writing about factual things, they tend to become a little bit obsessed with the details of it.
Narrow Bridge.
Does that have some meaning to you, Narrow Bridge?
There it is, so like bridges.
Well, for the record, we passed like 8 narrow bridges since we started recording.
Okay, good.
You haven't noticed, so there you go.
Good, fantastic. So what I wanted to circle back around to was, really quick, the folklore surrounding taking pieces of the tree.
Yes. Because this is the part that you think we should trip.
I do.
Okay.
So I think that, and as much as I love nature and don't want to destroy it, I think that we should try to take a piece of onto the Devil's Tree. Now, past reports have at least 2 of them that I've found, 2 accounts of people taking a piece of the tree, like chipping off a wood chip, having it in their pocket and meeting disastrous results, like meeting a fatal end.
Okay.
In one,
and you want to do this?
I do. I do want to do this. I think that's absolutely part of it. But we can't be scared of the trip, you know? So, in one, it was one of the workers.
Is that legal for Trophy?
Not sure. It could possibly be. Hang on, I'll tell you.
A bucket list thing of mine.
Is it?
I've never been to the hole.
That is, it is Lake Okeechobee, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Do you want to turn around and go to Lake Okeechobee?
Go on the way back.
Okay. What was I saying? So one of the workers that had tried to cut down the tree, they said that he met pretty much his demise.
You said, yeah, it was fatal.
Fatal.
I'm trying to think of the word.
An accident. I don't remember the wording exactly. But he had a piece of wood chip in his pocket when he went back for more chainsaws, and something very bad happened to him. Again, it's not specific, so I think it's part of the folklore that's been added in there, in my opinion. And another one was a tripper, somebody who came to get a piece of the tree, and something bad happened to her, like a car crash.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was immediately after?
Immediately after she was shipping the tree, yeah.
So how did they went from immediately after to 21 days? By the way, divisible by 7. So do we know any kind of way of how it
Where are you talking about 21 days?
You said within 21 days.
Mm-hmm.
When you were reading one of the articles, you said within 21 days you will get into a car accident.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the things that I read wasn't associated with, wonder if I can find that again.
No, you said it was with a piece of the...
With a piece of that thing.
A piece of the tree.
Yeah, and that was the lore.
Keep it in your car, you will get into a car accident within 21 days.
No. Specifically, it said if you wanted somebody to get into a car accident.
If you wanted to curse them,
if you wanted to curse somebody, you would put a piece of this wood in their car. And no, I'm not bringing a piece of wood home to curse anybody. I would never do that.
Yeah. Well, you know.
But now that it's recorded, at least I have my...
Oh, you have the evidence. So you so didn't do it because you said on a podcast you wasn't going to do it. There's your evidence, Your Honor.
Exactly.
It's exonerated.
Okay, so 21 is divisible by 7,
yes,
but not by 6.
Right.
Not by 6.
Just saying, 7, you know? 6 is 7.
All right, so I think that we're probably wrapped for now until we get there.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to talk about
anything?
So I
think this is going to be the end of this podcast.
Right.
And so the next podcast that we have will either be the Casadega explanation or the results of what happened on this trip.
Right.
So we don't know yet. And quite honestly, by the time that you get this one, we would have already recorded the other one. So we're gonna wait a few days between releasing all of them, so you don't get a plethora of.
Right.
So as always, please subscribe to the podcast. Tripping on Legends, you can get it on iTunes, you can get it on Google Play, you can get it on all those kind of forums.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Twitter, we're at Susie Balzano.
Susie Balzano, you're at Nene, my friend.
Nene, my friend. So,
and the WordPress, which I've become really active with in terms of not only just posting my stuff, but posting folklorian interest things, especially in Florida and Massachusetts, my holes. Is at trippingonlegends.wordpress.com.
And also, I'm just going to throw a shameless plug out there really quick. If any cartoonist or artist would like to help us with a project that we have secondary to the Tripping on Legends project, please contact us at spookytripping@gmail.com, right? Spookytripping@gmail.com, or just comment here. All right, and this is Natalie Crist.
And Christopher Balzano.
Until...
Saying
what?
Make sure all your trips are legendary.
No, I forgot. It's been too long.
Okay.
You can't.
You're not going to edit it out.
We're totally editing out.
Now you say it. This is Chris Balzano.
This is Natalie Crist saying, what was it?
Saying, I hope all your trips are legendary. Say it.
I hope all your trips are legendary.